This edition of Monocle on Saturday was first broadcast on the 3rd of January 2026. Hello, I'm Georgina Godwin, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. This is Monocle on Saturday. Welcome to the first show of 2026. Coming up on today's programme, we have a look through the week's news and culture with historian, broadcaster and screenwriter Alex von Tunzelman. And I can just give you a little preview that Alex and I are about to go off on a big adventure together. We'll tell you all about it. Then,
when we take the time to stop and examine what could go wrong by thinking negative, we can use our creativity to ultimately take the risk out of our goals.
Well, that's all about New Year's resolutions and how you get to keep them. We'll tell you more a little bit later on Monocle on Saturday. First, though, here's the news. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro declared a state of emergency early this morning, accusing the United States of a very serious military aggression after multiple explosions and aircraft-like sounds were reported across the capital, Caracas. We'll have much more on that story in just a moment. Donald Trump has warned he could support Iranian protesters if security forces open fire, as demonstrations over soaring prices spread across the country, leaving at least 10 people dead. Iran has accused Washington of dangerous interference and has called on the UN Security Council to condemn the remarks. And Britain has launched the National Year of Reading 2026, a government-backed campaign led by the National Literacy Trust, aimed at reversing a long-term decline in reading for pleasure, particularly among children and teenagers. The initiative seeks to make reading feel relevant again by linking books to everyday interests such as sport, music and popular culture. Hello and welcome to Monocle on Saturday. And as I said, I'm joined in the studio by Alex von Tunzelman, historian, broadcaster and screenwriter. Good morning to you, Alex.
Good morning, Georgina.
Now, normally we would start off with some fluffy chat, and indeed we have some very fluffy chat coming up. But I actually think that we need to dive straight in on this top story because it is moving as fast as we can keep up with it. This is what's going on in Venezuela. So it looks like the US, well, we know the US has launched an air attack. This has been officially confirmed in Washington by an unnamed official. He is remaining, or she is remaining anonymous, but it does seem that there has been official confirmation of this. Maduro's issued a state of emergency. Let's just have a look through the wires. What are you seeing coming up?
Well, I mean, this is, as you say, incredibly rapidly moving story. And it sort of started when I woke up this morning, very early London time. It started as news stories now do, with pictures on social media that you think for a minute, are these AI or are they real? And you kind of try and verify it. And what they appeared to show was over Caracas and indeed some other parts of Venezuela, Chinook and Apache helicopters flying over and bombing, and some really large, pictures, for instance, of, a harbour with ships blowing up. Really quite a substantial bombing campaign, and kind of quite clearly targets really across Venezuela. So what it looked like and what increasingly it does appear to be is a pretty major intervention.
Alex, what's really interesting here is the use of air power, because why would you use a Chinook if you were not planning to put boots on the ground?
That is absolutely a question people are asking, because that does seem like not a normal bombing strategy. I mean, on the other hand, of course, at the moment, this is very much the fog of war. It's a chaos moment and we can't really necessarily know what's going on. But that is one of the things that's hinting at this possibly turning into a ground operation as well as an air attack.
So I'm just sort of perusing the wires. So Maduro says it rejects serious military aggression perpetrated by the current government of the United States. Maduro's urging people to go out. He says that they are going to implement all of their defence plans, and we don't really know what that means.
No, and I mean, it's also hard to know that because we don't quite know yet what full nature this attack is going to take either. So, obviously I'm sure they're going to mobilise everything that they've got, because this is clearly an existential threat to the Venezuelan regime. Also, just a very, very, very significant operation generally. I mean, any country in this position with what is fairly clearly an attack on their sovereignty would mobilised to its greatest possible extent. I mean, this looks like a very, very serious intervention. And as I say, we're learning the details kind of really as we talk.
There's more and more coming out now. The BBC is telling us that Donald Trump has ordered strikes on sites in Venezuela, including the capital Caracas and military facilities. US officials have told CBS News that this is indeed the case. The White House hasn't officially responded. Venezuela's denounced military aggression. Maduro's declared a national emergency. As you say, we've seen all this footage. We're hearing first-person testimony about how scared people are on the streets. Buildings, particularly around the centre and the parliament, are being evacuated. And of course, we're seeing all these pictures, but in this time of manipulated images, we simply cannot verify these.
Exactly. I mean, you have to be so careful with it. And a lot of these are coming from, one of the things that it's the complexity of social media. One of these things that's happening is that we're seeing pictures much more quickly than we would have in the past. And in some ways, the fact that just ordinary people are filming it is giving you actually a much more of a kind of, if you like, sort of worm's eye view than you ever would have got of military interventions in the past. At the same time, we also know that people are out there faking things. And so it's extremely hard when these are just coming from civilians, really to differentiate between the fake and the real images. I mean, I've seen all sorts of things come up this morning. And some of them, obviously we've got also various news organisations trying very fast to verify what is real and what isn't. It's very, very hard to do these days. I mean, there are various kind of generators you can run these things through to see if they've been manipulated and so on, but it is increasingly very, very difficult. And, you have to use geolocation and all of these sorts of techniques. And it's certainly, it looks like, obviously the bombing is now confirmed. That we know is happening. But there have been all sorts of images, for instance, just sort of street scenes around Caracas, some purporting to show people sort of screaming and running away, some purporting to show people being, civilians being arrested by the authorities, all sorts of things going on. It's going to be very, very hard to pick through what here is true and what is misdescribed or completely AI generated and fake.
I'm really, really pleased that you in particular are here because you are uniquely placed to give us historical context for this. You've written a book called, and this is back in 2011, called Red Heat, Conspiracy, Murder and the Cold War in the Caribbean. And that was an historical study of the political scene in the Caribbean during the 1950s and 1960s. And I think this really gives us the wider view on what might be going on here.
It does. I mean, that book is very much kind of around the Cuban Missile Crisis, but really is looking at the kind of history of US interventions in the Caribbean and Latin America, which of course have a very long history, really dating back for a couple of 100 years. And, go back to the Monroe Doctrine and so on, which is very much about the idea that the US, while it doesn't see itself as an empire, absolutely claims a sort of hegemonic superiority and jurisdiction over the whole of the Americas, really. And, at the time of the Monroe Doctrine, that was framed around resisting European aggression. But that has moved, subsequently with the Truman Doctrine and so on, into resisting communism, which was then sort of described also as a form of external aggression, even though it was coming up internally and was really, coming up far less than a lot of American hawks thought it was at the time. So, if you look, for instance, I think we're going to be looking over the next few days back to things like Operation Power Pack, the 1965 intervention in the Dominican Republic under Lyndon Johnson, which, sort of that was kind of a huge cause célèbre in the US before the Vietnam War really kind of took over as the central cause for students and protesters against the American government. And that was an intervention on the basis that Johnson really freaked out over intelligence reports that the Dominican Republic might be going communist in the way Cuba had. But it's astonishing if you pick through the actual internal government documents. For instance, there's a phone call where he asks someone at the CIA, well, how many Castro communists are there in the Dominican Republic? And the man on the phone says, well, sir, we've positively identified 8 of them. And they staged a massive, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, enormous military intervention to wipe this out and really took out a kind of liberal elected government in Dominican Republic and replaced it with a military junta, which oppressed people then for decades. So, I mean, there are very, very worrying precedents here.
Absolutely. Alex, if we widen this net even wider and have a look at other Trump interventionist policies, the other big news story today, of course, is what's happening in Iran. So he's warned that the US will intervene if peaceful protesters are killed in Iran. Iran's saying this is reckless and dangerous. And one of the reasons this matters is that this is his foreign interventionist tendencies, if you like, are playing very badly with the MAGA base.
I mean, that's a very interesting aspect of this. And I have to say, all those US commentators, some very much on the centre as well as the right, who called him Donald the Dove in the past, are looking pretty stupid right now. You know, he seems to be actually firing on all cylinders all over the place. But the interesting thing, as you say, is this does actually play pretty poorly with his own base. I mean, we know, for instance, from polling, that the idea of war in Venezuela is extremely unpopular, even among his supporters, among the kind of MAGA hardcore, if you like. And so this does raise some questions about exactly why he's doing this right now. And a lot of people are saying, look, he's actually falling in the polls. He's doing pretty badly. Every time there is a kind of poll, sort of actual election, the Democrats seem to be coming out kind of astonishingly ahead at this point. And, meanwhile, you've got the Epstein scandal that's rolled on and on and on. And does this just feel a bit like a distraction from all of that?
And say he achieves his aim in Venezuela and gets regime change. Who goes in there? Because, of course, what we have seen is Maria Corina Machado, who has recently won the Nobel Peace Prize. She dedicated it to Donald Trump. She's an opposition leader in Venezuela. But when you dig into her background and what she believes in, it becomes a little bit more complex.
Well, she's pretty pro-Trump. I mean, so, it would be, should we say, a very open question about how that would really play in Venezuela were she to be put in as a kind of, a sort of puppet leader of a regime. I mean, who knows what's going to happen here, because we have literally no idea of their game plan. This is really just happening. But it does obviously bring up questions of regime change. I mean, there's a lot of people already this morning making comparisons to the invasion of Iraq. And as we, of course, know, with the invasion of Iraq, the massive problem there, aside from all the other problems, was not having any kind of plan, really a coherent plan for what would happen after the invasion. Sure, you can win a war, but can you win the peace? And no, they didn't. That was an absolute disaster in Iraq. And if what we're seeing here is something with similar or possibly even higher levels of complete failure to plan for that kind of future, then I think that's extremely worrying.
Well, it's very clear what Donald Trump's New Year's resolutions are. We're just a few days into 2026, and many of the rest of us will have set New Year's resolutions which don't involve regime change or taking over countries. A book that might be able to help us actually achieve these goals is Success is a Numbers Game by Kyle Austin Young. So Kyle's framework explains how we can use probability to our advantage and why thinking negatively is the key to getting more of what you want in life. So I spoke to him earlier, and he began by telling me how his background led to writing the book.
I'm a business strategy consultant, and I came into that line of work following a couple of layoffs over a decade ago. I lost 2 leadership positions back to back within about 13 months of each other. And that led to ultimately a desire for diversification of my income. I didn't want to be so reliant on a single paycheck. So I decided to start consulting, and I had the privilege of working with people in a wide variety of fields. There were doctors out of Harvard Medical who were trying to change the conversation around cancer. There were organizational psychologists who were trying to help people experience more engagement in their workday. There were technology companies trying to use virtual reality to help people learn new languages. And my job was to try to find what those projects had in common so that I could keep my own sanity while delivering a win for these organizations. And ultimately, what I came to believe was it was my job to try to steward the odds of success that these people were experiencing and do everything I could to help them get a better outcome. And so that led to some really great success stories with my initial clients over a decade ago, led to many more opportunities. Ultimately, the chance to write for places like Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Psychology Today, Fast Company, many others. And then finally, the opportunity to write the book. And in between, I go fishing, and that's when I think about all of these big thoughts in my head.
Kyle, the book details a 5-step probability hacking framework that can help people achieve their goals. And I'd like to just unpick that when it comes to New Year's resolutions. So tell us about the simple misunderstanding that can lead to overconfidence.
Well, one of the biggest problems is people tend to fall into a thinking trap, and I'll illustrate it by saying, let's say you've set the New Year's resolution that you want to run a marathon. You're going to train with the goal of ultimately running a marathon. So you hire a running coach, and she tells you that there's 3 things you're going to have to do in order to be ready on race day. She has regimens that are going to force you to eat, sleep, and train according to these certain parameters. And it's your job to stick with those. Don't cheat on them. Don't only do 1 or 2. You need to do all 3. You need to eat, sleep, and train according to these parameters. So there's 3 things that have to go right for us to accomplish this goal. And when we set a goal, maybe a New Year's resolution, I think we instinctively try to get some sense of what's going to be required of us. And then we check in with ourselves and ask the question, do we feel like we can do each of these things? The problem is a lot of us fall into this thinking trap. So I'll put some imaginary numbers onto this to illustrate it. Let's say that in the process of considering whether we're capable of eating, sleeping, and training according to these regimens, we decide that we think that it's 70% across the board. There's a 70% chance we'll eat the way we're supposed to, a 70% chance we'll sleep the way we're supposed to, and a 70% chance we'll train the way that we're supposed to, according to our running coach. This is where people fall into the thinking trap, and the thinking trap is called averaging. If we feel good about the individual steps to achieving a goal, we tend to feel good about our odds of success overall, our odds of ultimately getting the outcome we want. But that's not mathematically sound. That's not how it works. In reality, we can't average. If these are true prerequisites to our success, we have to multiply them. And if we multiply 0.7 times 0.7 times 0.7, we find that there's actually only a 34% chance that we will, in fact, be ready on race day. The odds are we're going to slip up in one of these 3 areas and ultimately not find success. I wrote this book first to illustrate for people that their odds of success are often worse than they think they are, and why I think that explains a lot of the failure we see in our world. But then, exactly as you said, I teach people a framework for improving their odds so that they actually can achieve the types of results they're looking for.
You mentioned that thinking negatively is the key to getting more of what you want in life. That seems counterintuitive.
Well, it's exactly right. A lot of people in pursuit of big goals, they tell us to think positively. They say, don't worry about what could go wrong. If it's meant to happen, it'll happen. If you want it enough, it'll happen. That actually is not in any way an antidote to risk. It doesn't cure the uncertainty that's often inherent in our goals. What can help us improve our odds of success is thinking negative. When we identify the things that could go wrong, in the context of the marathon example, what are some things that could derail a training regimen? Well, maybe bad weather, maybe a lack of motivation, maybe an injury. When we take the time to stop and examine what could go wrong by thinking negative, we can use our creativity to ultimately take the risk out of our goals. If we're concerned about bad weather, we might get a gym membership for a period of time. If we're concerned about injury, we might develop a stretching routine that helps prevent injury. If we're concerned about a lack of motivation, we might find a running partner. When we graph out everything that has to go right in order to get what we want, and then take the time to identify the potential bad outcomes, we have an opportunity to tilt the odds in our favor, and that can make all the difference.
Kyle, what's your New Year's resolution?
Oh my goodness. Well, I actually am training for a half marathon, so I'm half as ambitious as I claim to be in that example.
That was Kyle Austin Young on his book Success is a Numbers Game, published by Hay House Business, which is out now. Still with me is Alex von Tunzelmann. Do you have a New Year's resolution you're prepared to share?
I'm afraid mine is the boring one about doing more exercise. So I was listening to that with some interest as to how I can stick to it.
Well, the thing is that according to some of the stories we found today, you may not need to do that. So there is this extraordinary story in the New York Times about biohacking and the craze for Chinese peptides. Tell us more.
Oh, this is astonishing. And really, I definitely encourage people to read the whole thing because it's so weird. So basically, this is obviously coming from, guess what, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, tech bro culture. People are going crazy for Chinese peptides, and they're having peptide raves. Sounds like about the most inadvisable thing you could possibly do. And what's happening here is effectively that people are self-medicating to, they hope, improve their physical performance. Now, peptides, what those are, as the piece helpfully explains, I'm not a scientist, are short chains of amino acids which regulate your hormones and reduce inflammation in the body, right? And they're seen as a sort of miracle drug in some ways. Now, some of these are commercially available already. So, for instance, they are the P in the GLP-1, which is Ozempic, Wegovy, these kinds of weight loss drugs. And of course, those have been incredibly successful in the way they've regulated people's hormones. But those are the only ones really currently licensed for use in the US. There are, of course, peptides in various beauty products and things like this. But in terms of ones that you actually inject and take, those are the only ones you're really supposed to at this point. That's not what's happening here. What's happening is that people are buying things on the grey market, direct from factories in China, mixing their own peptide combos designed to do things like stimulate blood vessel growth so you recover more quickly after an injury, or indeed improve eye contact. There's a certain type of peptide that they call Ozempic for autism because it makes you much better at eye contact. And people are kind of taking their own combos of these things, which they're shooting up and injecting into themselves. I can't really emphasise what a bad idea this is. There's a woman in the piece who says, oh, yeah, I've been doing all of this and my blood pressure has gone up by 10 beats a minute and all my hair's fallen out, but I'm still going. I'm keeping going. And you're like, lady, that was the sign to stop. Please stop.
It's quite extraordinary. But I do wonder, I mean, clearly there's big money in this. And so why isn't there proper research? Why isn't this regulated? Why is Big Pharma not jumping on this and bringing it to us in a safe and marketable format?
Well, I think the answer is it is. It's just that that's going to take kind of some years, right? Because this is incredibly new tech. It's all just sort of coming out at this point. And what normally happens, in this world is that it takes about 10 years for drugs to reach market and go through sort of clinical tests that you'd hope they do, regulation, and also kind of, finding the right kind of doses and things, because people are just kind of mixing this up at a rave, are not really kind of going with any sort of, sort of authorised dose or anything like this. I mean, who knows what they're doing to themselves. And I think, we will be seeing these drugs come onto the market in a much wider way. It's just that these users are not prepared to wait.
Yeah. So there's another related story, and this one from the BBC. It's talking about how K-beauty, that's Korean beauty, went from a viral trend to an economic powerhouse. Now, I have to say right up front that I am a huge, huge fan of K-beauty products. I have changed my entire regime, my skin regimen, mostly actually after speaking to India Knight, who is a beauty columnist. And in fact, if you're interested in India, and particularly at this time of year when we stay home. Her new book is called Home, and she is the current guest on Meet the Writers, speaking about that book, but also about her life, kind of working at the cutting edge, if you like, of beauty, being the first one to try all these products and so on. And she seems to think that K-beauty is a very good idea too.
I'm right on board. I mean, I think it is probably, it's sort of taking over as the world's best skincare. I think in the past you might have said Japanese skincare was the kind of most cult type, and I think K-beauty now really has it. And so I will definitely be listening to that Meet the Writers with great interest. But I think it's sort of fascinating in how big it's become. And so South Korea in the first half of 2025 actually overtook France as the world's second largest exporter of beauty products after the US. So that's massive for a fairly kind of small country. It's become absolutely huge. And these kind of products that are looking at glass skin, this is the current trend in it. Now, I would say, if you've been listening to the biohacking and the idea of Chinese peptides, I wouldn't try that. I think Korean skincare is really a lot safer and it's kind of fine. And if you want to go crazy and experiment in the new year, this is the place to go. A lot of sheet masks that people wear to kind of improve their skin, and a very cult product. Now, I have actually tried this, snail mucin. Now, this is the kind of slime that snails excrete as they make little trails, and apparently putting this on your skin is brilliant. Now, I have to say, I fell for this. I bought a tub of this stuff because I thought, come on, that's fascinating, and I do love a weird cosmetic. It's so revolting, Georgina. It's so sticky.
I have to say, I know exactly what you're talking about because I use it too. But here's it. Do you use salmon sperm?
I have not used salmon sperm.
Oh, I
that's
do.
The other thing.
Love a bit
really?
of
We're
salmon
well into
sperm.
that, are we? Okay, well, that's next.
But honestly, it's had an effect on my skin. I'm loving all of this
Well,
stuff.
everyone's going in for the Korean 10-step, which is not a dance routine. It is actually a skincare regimen where you basically follow 10 whole steps. Now, we used to do 3, cleanse, tone and moisturise.
Yeah.
Now we got 10.
Wow.
So it's certainly a great way to sell products.
Yeah. Listen, I think there's a great business opportunity here because you mentioned that it's not a dance routine. But could there not be a great K-pop, K-beauty crossover with the Korean 10-step?
Absolutely. Why not? Let's see it happen pretty soon. I mean, I think already the K-pop stars are definitely have their product endorsements in place. So it's just the next logical step.
Totally. Alex, let's tell people about our next step because we are going on a fabulous adventure.
We are. Both of us are thrilled to be going to the world's largest and in many ways most thrilling literary festival. The Jaipur Literary Festival takes place in India from the 15th to the 19th of January, and we're both going to be there.
And I mean, we're both having to work pretty hard while we're there. I'm interviewing Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web. Crucially, not the internet, as he points out. Leo Varadkar, the former Taoiseach of Ireland. Anuradha Roy, fantastic Indian writer. I'm appearing at conferences talking about Asian market for books, something that I am having to mug up on. And many, many other events. I know you're doing a fair few.
Doing at least 3, doing something on the Suez Crisis following my book about that, Blood and Sand, doing something talking about Gandhi, Savarkar and Jinnah, the kind of figures, some of the figures who were important in kind of Indian independence and Pakistani independence. And I mean, lots more to come. So many events kind of coming up. I think we're going to be working pretty hard and we've got to make sure to keep some time for shopping because Jaipur is an incredible city for shopping.
Well, can you just give us a little bit of your background on shopping here? Because silk slippers is extraordinary. Tell us about that.
Yes, so I've got this company, Silk Road Slippers, with my wonderful colleagues, Alexandra Pringle and Faisal Khan. And we basically run writing courses, but we do also sometimes sell some things that we have found on our travels. And Jaipur is indeed one of our favourite places to shop. We've got some beautiful jewellery, gold-plated silver with Mughal-style sliced diamonds, which I'm a big fan of. I'm actually wearing a ring with some in right now. And I love the way that they cut jewels in India. Is not a brilliant cut. It's this traditional cut that really preserves the natural shape and beauty of the jewel, which I really much prefer.
I'm just looking at some of the other people that are going to be there. So Stephen Fry will be there. Damon Golgut, of course, a wonderful writer. Sashi Tharoor, who is the Indian opposition politician. Abdul Razak Gurna, who's of course huge prize winner, and many, many others.
Yes, I mean, it's always a really incredible lineup. I mean, they do get very, very big names in at Jaipur. And, I think it'll be very exciting to do. It's a wonderful festival as well where you get huge audiences. And I think it's a funny thing as a writer, that you kind of sit here doing your job. And, it's quite unglamorous, really. I mean, obviously, I enjoy it tremendously, but it's not the sort of job where you're sort of a rock star. And then you go to Jaipur and suddenly there's 1,000 people kind of crowding into a hall to hear you. And your head swells and swells. And I have to say, on the plane back, I usually have to sit there sort of sticking a fork in myself a bit. Right, come back to earth now. You are not a VIP. You've got to just get on with your life.
But it is extraordinary. And what I love about it is the age of the audience is so much younger that you would see it at a British literary festival, the average age much, much younger. And they buy books.
They do. They buy books and they read books. I mean, India is an incredibly literary culture in many ways. And of course, with so many languages in India, with, dozens of official languages, but of course, English being in some ways the most widely spoken. So they read very internationally. And I find that fascinating that, as you said, when you get these lineups of people really from all over the world coming and great writers from all over the world, I think that's something really refreshing and wonderful, especially because, in the UK, I think we do, unfortunately, read very little literature in translation. We're not great at reading in other languages. And I think it's wonderful to be somewhere where actually there is a much broader take on culture.
And of course, JLF, or Jaipur Lit Fest, is not just in Jaipur. This is the main festival. But JLF has festivals all over the world.
Absolutely. They seem to crop up everywhere. In the US, in London, of course, there is an annual one that they run here too, usually at the British Library. and all over the world, in the US and lots of other places too. And I think that's kind of wonderful. They're creating this really global literary culture, which is just great to see.
No, absolutely. So I would just say to people in the Northern Hemisphere, if you're looking towards the end of January and thinking, you know what, it's going to be miserable, and you can justify taking a few days off. Honestly, there's just going to be one hell of a party in Jaipur. And if you like books, it's going to be amazing because there will be this fantastic gathering of some of the world's top thinkers and writers. And you could be there.
Yeah. Just hanging out.
So do join us. We would absolutely love that. Alex, thank you so much for being on the show today. That's all we've got time for. We're going to be, of course, following that Venezuela story as the day goes on. That's moving very, very quickly. Thanks to our producers, Mariella Bevan and Tom Webb, and our studio engineer, Lily Austin. And Monocle on Saturday will return next weekend. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.